Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast presented to you by Texas Pete. I'm Connor O'Gara. Will, how's your weekend?
It's been fantastic, man. We just offline a little bit about wait, hold on, let me try that again. It's been fantastic, man. Yeah, I mean, being at my parents' house has been super relaxing. I've been working really hard. Other than just the concept of, not understanding Wi-Fi or that I need to have it for work. I'd give it an 8 out of 10 other than this very moment. But yeah, it's always a struggle going back home and just kind of linking back up with your regular life,
Yeah, the conversation with your parents over the Wi-Fi situation, why it's shutting down constantly. For those of us that work remotely, you've had these conversations before. I remember having that a few years ago with my mom and being like, I just can't have internet constantly cutting out. Kind of makes my job a little bit difficult to do. But yeah, that whole dynamic is probably how my second grade teachers felt when they were explaining to me that I couldn't just put random letters in the middle of words and say that it's spelled correctly. So
Mm-hmm.
I get it. Life is just one big circle, and it comes back around. Yeah. Got to this weekend instead of, for the first time since August, not either hosting someone or traveling or covering wall to wall college football. I was like home on a Saturday without a million things to do. It was weird. It was really weird. I love
What'd you
college
do?
football season. That's a good question, Will. It's a good question. We had a few errands to run,
Mm-hmm.
nothing crazy, anything like that. But yeah, we mostly hung out. Lauren had an event Saturday night that she had to go to. So I was on solo parenting duty. Who would ever put their significant other on solo parenting duty? Couldn't be me. Couldn't be me ever on a Saturday. I would never do such a thing. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it was a nice little weekend. It was very relaxing. So yeah, we do have a lot to talk about today. Lots to talk about. We have former Mizzou star Sean Weatherspoon. He is going to join us. Excellent conversation with him, and the things that he's up to. Great perspective on Mizzou as well. Something that he's very dialed into. We're going to have Lad of the Week as well. But first, we are, I think, as crazy as this sounds, a day, by the time people are listening to this, a day away from the early signing period. And the early signing period just is not worth getting that worked up about anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not. I teased this the other day, but this is kind of what I mean by that. I plan on reacting less than ever to like class rankings, amount of blue chip recruits, amount of top 100 recruits, like all that stuff. And for the diehards like yourself, I realize that early signing period is a huge day, and there are still a lot of things that on Wednesday I'm very interested in, like Dylan Raiola, uh, whether Auburn is able to get just every 5-star receiver that is out there, which looks like they're on their way to doing that. Any potential DJ Lagway drama, although I don't think that's going to happen based on his comments after the unofficial over the weekend. He appears to be locked in, so that might be a nice break for Florida. All those different things. I will be dialed in, so I'm not saying that I'm just going to totally put it on the back burner. Still a major believer in Stars Matter. Ari Wasserman, trademark pending, I think, on that one. They do. But Stars Matter in a different way than they did as recently as 5 years ago, like 4 or 5 years ago. And this entire idea of the early signing period being this end all be all for your roster, like it's well documented. It's just not what it once was. And it's murkier than ever this time in which you're supposed to be building up your high school recruiting class. I spent Thursday afternoon, Friday morning, doing a deep dive on the 2021 and 2022 classes, specifically where they are now as it relates to the transfer portal. So, as of Friday afternoon, that was the last time I did one of these. Sage Ryan was the last one that I got in there. Probably missed one over the weekend or something, but here are the
Mm-hmm.
numbers based on where we're at as of Friday afternoon. Of the top 100 recruits in the 2021 class, 40 of them have transferred at least once. Okay? Of the top 100 recruits in the 2022 class, 29 of them have transferred at least once. Yep. That is 69 of 200 top 100 recruits in those two combined classes that have transferred. And I went with those two classes because they have both the benefit of the loosened portal restrictions while also being on campus multiple years. I didn't think it was fair to do the 2023 class yet because they've only had the one fall. They could still transfer in the spring based on position battles, all those different things. I might have to revisit that in April after that plays out. I'll probably do that just to keep a running total of this. So basically, with the two classes that we looked at here, 35% of the top recruits that are 2 or 3 years into their college experience, those guys have hit the portal at least once. It's a lot. So it's a whole lot. There's more. 23 schools lost at least one top 100 recruit from the 2021 or 2022 classes. 14 schools lost multiple top 100 recruits from those classes. Will, I'm not going to put you on the spot too much here, but do you have any guesses on who lost the most top 100 recruits from those two classes? Don't
Well, it's
overthink
got to
it.
be someone with a ton of top 100 recruits. So it's either got to be, to me, Georgia or Ohio State.
It's not a bad guess, but I think you overthought it.
Okay.
It's A&M. A&M.
Sorry, my mistake. I assumed it was like a playing time, like, oh, too many 5 stars logged in. No, it's some dudes got paid to go somewhere they didn't want to go. They looked up and went, wait a minute, I'm out of here.
So Will just was very, very mean to A&M fans. I'm gonna be nice to A&M fans with what I'm about to say. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So like you would hear that and hear that howl of a laugh that Will just threw in there, and you would think A&M is the outlier, and it makes a lot of sense because of what the outside perception is. They brought in this unbelievable amount of talent in the 2022 class, and then they had the coaching change, all those different things. If you bump this out to not just top 100 recruits, but all 4 and 5-star recruits from those classes 2021 and 2022, those are for what we will refer to the rest of this podcast. That is what we will call blue chip recruits. If I say you are a blue chip recruit, that means you are a 4 or 5-star, and I'm just going entirely based 24/7 sports talent composite. So we're not going like, oh, Rival said this and this public on 3 said that. No. We're just going based on the composite here. So if you factor that in, well, A&M is actually normal, very normal, in another key area as it relates to the portal. And that's why I wanted to provide some context, because you can see some of those raw numbers and you can think to yourself, that's really bad. That's an indictment of a program. Obviously, they don't want to stay there. The other deep dive I did was looking at all 287 blue chip recruits that signed with the SEC in 2021 and 2022. Okay. 287 of them. That's all. I clicked on so many bios. My God. And you just have to, because sometimes you're like, oh, I know how this guy's career turned out and whatever, but like you just got to double check every possible thing. So that's 287 recruits that were 4 or 5-star rated in those two classes. And how many of those 287 recruits, those blue chip recruits, have transferred at least once? 138. Well, 138. So 48% of the blue chip recruits signed in the SEC in that 2-year stretch have already transferred at least once. That's half, right? Half of those SEC recruits that they signed. And that's why I bring up the A&M part of this, and why it'll make a little bit more sense, and why this isn't going to look quite as bad as what that number just was. Though obviously it sucks that A&M lost 10 top 100 recruits in that 2-year stretch. There is a reason why I can't get overly worked up about the early signing period. And that's it right there. It's like knowing, oh, well, this guy might stay and this guy's probably going to leave. And that's like, those numbers are probably going to skew even more. I mean, they just are in this stage, unless we get some sort of regulation that comes down and says, nope, this is how we're going to be able to regulate tampering or whatever. I'm not banking on that changing. I'm trying to adapt my approach. So there is the famous blue chip ratio that Bud Elliott does, right? Like something that I think is really interesting, is really important. There needs to be like a what do you want to call it? Like a tentacle, a spin-off. I don't know. Something that is related to that. Maybe a blue chip departure ratio, which would be worth tracking. Because obviously, as you mentioned, Georgia, Ohio State, like they're probably the teams that are losing the most amount of talent. A lot of people talking about Georgia and, oh, Georgia is losing this 5-star and that 5-star, blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, obviously Georgia's losing more 5-star talent than Vandy. Okay. That is going to happen. But
Mm-hmm.
this is the blue chip departure ratio would essentially be like, all right, what percentage of your blue chip recruits are transferring? So I did that breakdown for each SEC school in those two classes.
I'm
If your
so glad you did that. I was actually gonna ask you that. I was like trying to like do some quick math because I was like, I don't want to just stick you with the question of like how many of those guys are still at A&M. Thank you. I'm gonna shut up and listen now.
No, so I'm a loser. I'm an absolute loser. And I thought, okay, if I just present those numbers and I do like a bunch of takeaways off of that, like yeah, you can go a lot of different ways. But this is what I think will be maybe even more interesting and more telling to communicate this point of why the early signing period does not have the same gravitas, the same level of importance that it once did.
Mm-hmm.
So if your blue chip departure rate is 100%, that's bad. That's real bad. That's Vandy. Yeah, Vandy signed 4 blue chip recruits in those 2 cycles. All of them hit the portal.
Mm-hmm.
Basura. Don't like that. Not good. Here is what blue chip departure ratio looks like for each school in the SEC for those 2021, 2022 classes. You do not want a high number here. Like golf, lower the better. Low percentage means good, really, really good. We're talking about departure ratio for your blue chip recruits. So we will start with the worst and then work our way up to the best. Vandy, dead last, 100%. Tennessee, second to worst at 69%. Ole Miss, third to worst at 67%. And then Kentucky at 62%. Florida at 58%. South Carolina at 57%. Your LSU Tigers at 56%. Mississippi State at 55%. Auburn, 50%. Texas A&M, only 49%.
There you
Mizzou,
go.
40. That's why we add context. Mizzou, 43%. Georgia, 39%. Arkansas, 33%. And the number one team in the SEC in terms of retaining blue chip talent is Alabama with a just 27% blue chip departure ratio. So that's relevant, right? Like that's important for all these different things because yes, we're going to talk about all the different 5-stars and top 100 recruits that Georgia and Bama are getting. But if they were losing them and if their blue chip departure ratio was extremely high, and if it was in the 60s and 70%, we'd be like, all right, this doesn't really matter. You could argue that Georgia and Bama have more signing day significance because of their ability to retain these blue chip recruits, all those different things. So that's part of this. The takeaway from
follow up. What
yeah,
were the number of cycles here? So you said you started with 2021.
2021 and 2022. That's all we looked at. We looked at 2 cycles. 2023 is still too recent, but I will again do that breakdown I think in April or May when we have more context of guys that enter after at least being on campus for a year. I think that's fair. Like you could look up the numbers now, and I started to, and then I was kind of like, I don't think this is. There are going to be a lot of kids that transfer probably as well after going through spring and being like, crap, I'm still I'm third string in the depth chart, and I'm going into my second season. So that's why I think that context is a little bit different as we look at guys that have finished their second and third seasons in college football.
Yes, and where I was going with that is coaching turnover, right? So if you are Florida or LSU, you replaced your coach. Like the coach that the 2021 class committed to is not there, right? So a lot of those guys will just leave because they don't have any existing relationship with the new staff. Whereas if you are in Alabama, if you are in Georgia, right, where you have coaching continuity, there's a whole, because the biggest swaths of guys, as we've seen with A&M, will leave when a coach leaves, right? So A&M was actually probably sitting pretty before Jimbo left because they've just had another, 5-6 guys hit the portal. So I wanted to hit that because you're right about A&M. I just looked at the talent composite. They were 4th going into the year, actually right behind Ohio State. So 1 down. So actually it is just they have a lot of talent there. And if Jimbo had been retained, which again, we're not saying that was a great, like that wouldn't be the right move, but they would have even less because now you're talking about coaching turnover.
Right. And you're actually, so is, it's a fair point. And the number of, I think it was like 37 of the 69 top 100 recruits in those two cycles, if you looked at it nationally, like 37 of them came from places with a coaching change, like
Mm-hmm.
during that stretch. So LSU would be included in that. Florida would be included in that. Like if you're signing in the class of 2021 and you've got a coach that's only been there for 2 years, that would count as a change technically. So
Mm-hmm.
that is definitely part of it, but it's not all of it. Like
Oh yeah.
it's not just like these numbers are skewed wildly in favor of coaches that have that, obviously have departed or something like that. It feels magnified though. It does.
Mm-hmm.
And we sort of rationalize it a little bit more. I mean, Ole Miss is sitting there at 67%. Ole Miss has not had coaching turnover, and as crazy as it is to think about, there are only 3 coaches in the SEC who have been at their respective jobs longer than Lane Kiffin has been at Ole Miss. I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
is bonkers to think about, but they're still sitting there at 67%. We're going to get to the Ole Miss part of this in a second here, because there's obviously a lot of takeaways with what they are doing in the portal, how it relates to high school recruiting. So you look at those numbers, Will, and 9 of 14 SEC programs lost at least half of their signed blue chip recruits from the 2021 and 2022 classes. That is a really, really high number. Go figure that one of the 5 that didn't lose at least half of those blue chip recruits is A&M. So that was a point that I wanted to get to. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, A&M is fascinating. It is fascinating because you look back at that 2022 class, and now we have the context of what happened with Jimbo, and they were never able to quite make it work. And there still are going to be some good players, obviously, from that class. But I wonder if that's the last time that we are sitting there on signing day, early signing period, saying that class is a game changer, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of gone. I really, at least in terms of making that evaluation on signing day. And really, when was the last true game changer class in college football where they got that sort of billing on signing day and it was,
Mm-hmm.
oh, we're part of the movement. Like, so you used to talk about that with the Indiana basketball class in 2012, and that was going to be this we're the movement. We're going to change things. We're going to change the program. It's like, you guys actually aren't. A lot of you guys aren't going to stay on board, and the class before you was going to end up doing that, but whatever. So, like, when was the last time that we felt like that was a realistic billing for someone, both then and then with the context of like actually watching these classes develop and play out? Like 2013 Ohio State is one that felt like
Mm-hmm.
that a bit, at least, and it felt like that at the time, and it kind of felt like that after the fact as well, with them contributing to that 2014 national championship team. 2013 Ole Miss is another one, right?
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
that class, Will. I like you grew up in this in a different way than I did, but when you were seeing Tunzel, Kindici, Treadwell, Evan Ingram, these guys commit in that class, do you remember having your eyebrow raised? Like, as an outside fan, a fan within the division, what was your reaction when Hugh Freeze was getting all of his talent in the doors?
That's a great question. And it's even funnier to look at now, right? Because and we talked about Bo like fighting people, and that class immediately came to my mind because it was the fact that they were just these freaks. They were like Alabama players who were playing at Ole Miss, and the answer you're looking for, it was the answer at the time, is they're paying these kids. Everybody just immediately thought they're paying these kids. How did Ole Miss get all these guys? And turns out, I mean, they kind of were paying those kids, but who among us?
Yeah, exactly though. Like that class, I think you look at the good with and the bad with it, and obviously the NCAA violations that it was part of. You say no, but at the same time, that you got to be a part of a bit of history, and it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting though. 10 years later, how different the approach is at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is the talk of college football right now, not because in this week of the early signing period they're doing unbelievable 2013 like things. It is because, and I realize like they only, they do have some blue chip recruits in this class. Got 5 blue chip guys out of high school: Deion Smith, who was at LSU, I believe he started his career at, and is a
Yeah.
big JUCO guy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like you have that, but we're talking about Ole Miss because of what they're doing in the portal. And instead of adding these blue chip guys that they hope will stick around and turn into all SEC guys, they're just adding all SEC guys. I mean, it's crazy the haul. And you're gonna like we're gonna get off this call and I'm gonna check my phone. I'm gonna see that another big time SEC starter has committed to Ole Miss. Juice
Mm-hmm.
Wells, all SEC guy. Princely Umanmielen, all SEC guy from Florida, probably still butchering his last name, doing my best. Tyler Barron, 3-year starter at Tennessee, who I feel like has been there forever. He was there for the Pruitt era, probably
Yeah.
going to be an all SEC guy entering next year. Chris Paul Jr., multi-year starter at Arkansas, probably going to get preseason all SEC consideration as well. Feels like everyone is already tabbing Walter Nolan, the former number 2 overall recruit in that A&M 2022 class, to end up at Ole Miss as well. He played like an all SEC guy before he got hurt against Tennessee, and then was not the same type of player down the stretch. So like he could be a guy that ends up there. We're not even talking about the guys that they kept, the JJ McGee's, the Jared Ivey, like these things that they are doing that we're just looking it up at Ole Miss going, oh my God. Like even as I was putting this together, to Cameron Richardson crossing Egg Bowl enemy lines, going from Mississippi State's Ole Miss, like that was their best corner last year. I was like, who's going to replace Emmanuel Forbes? Oh yeah, that's probably going to be the best chance that they have to do it, but he's not Emmanuel Forbes. Like they are accumulating talent through the portal in ways that I don't know that we've ever seen an active head coach do it this way. Now, Lincoln Riley, what he was doing a couple years ago, a little bit different at USC when it's like, all right, he's bringing guys over from Oklahoma. You knew that he was going to be a heavy hitter with all this. And it was just a little bit different. So I do think that the Lane part of this is just so unbelievably interesting. He's going to sign another top 3 portal class. And
Mm-hmm.
nobody is sitting there saying like, oh, this is a tragedy for the sport. And oh, eyebrows raised. Wait till they get popped for NCAA violations, because it's different. Like the 2013 class
Mm-hmm.
at Ole Miss, everybody's talking about how fishy it is. Like, oh, you're going to be on probation at some point. With A&M 2022 class, Jimbo getting defensive about sliced bread took that initial skepticism from people like Lane, and all it did was just pour gasoline on the fire when Saban decides he's going to go on record saying that he thinks the class was bought. Like, we all, I think, if I remember correctly, a year and a half ago said, eventually we're going to get to this place. Eventually we're going to get to this place where there is this different kind of acceptance and there's this different sort of understanding of what the early signing period is versus what the transfer portal is. And if we're going to be at this place now, you'd better take advantage of that. And Lane is doing that. Whether people want to admit it or not, when Lane gets a big time recruit, there is a little, and recruit through the transfer portal, I should say, not recruit from the high school level. There's got to be this feeling from opposing fan bases of like, dang, man, got another one. Thought that guy would have fit in our scheme. Thought he would have looked really good in my team's colors. And man, that was an immediate starter who I thought was going to make an impact for us. And dang, it just goes to Ole Miss. I care way more about Lane's portal class than whether Team X flips a couple of 4-star recruits on signing day. I just do. Okay. Some of that goes back to my initial thoughts on recruiting and the people that always just got so into it. And from a macro standpoint, I get it. I remember, like, look, stars matter. I am a believer in that. But even then, I was kind of like, yeah, it's great that this 4-star is committed to Maryland. But we're about 3 or 4 steps away from saying, oh, that guy changed how I feel about Maryland. Okay. And maybe I'm different because I'm not in the weeds in the way that some of these people are. But because I do respect the people that cover recruiting for a living, and it is a grind that is different than pretty much anything other than I deal with covering this sport. And I love that fans are so dialed in. Many people listening to this are so dialed into recruiting, and I love all of you. I do. People that die hard are the reason that I get up here on a microphone and I don't have to sit here and tell you about our content being behind a paywall. Okay. That is something that I take great pride in. I love that people care that much. I just think we need to change, just tweak even how we talk about recruiting. What is worth getting excited for? What is not worth getting excited for? So I've got a scale, a scale that I think we can just apply. I don't want to call it a compass. That's a little bit too preachy. I know I get a little bit preachy up here. Okay, I do. Happens. Whatever.
We love a metric.
But I've got a scale. Yeah, let's you know what? Well, that's good. Let's call it a metric. Let's just stick with a metric, okay? So if your team shows up in a blue chip recruits top 8 recruiting graphic, that should equal from you, person listening to this, no excitement. No excitement. Don't let it register a thought in your brain. Do not tell yourself, oh, I'm going to do a bunch of Photoshop graphics of this guy playing middle linebacker for my team one day, or oh my God, that guy's going to rush for 2,000 yards. No, don't even bother. Don't begin that process. Do not let yourself mentally go to that place. If your team lands a verbal commitment from a blue chip recruit, that should equal your team shows up and a blue chip recruit's top 8 recruiting graphic levels of excitement.
Yep.
Okay. That makes sense. So we're sliding the scale. That's what we're doing. If your team signs a blue chip recruit, that should equal your team lands a verbal commitment from a blue chip recruit in terms of your level of excitement, right?
And that's
he signs
the current cycle, right? So that's because there's so many, some guys are committing in 2025, 26 now. You're talking about now, this would be the 2024 cycle that we're talking about. Because the 2025 cycle, like Bryce Underwood, that guy could end up in, Europe. Things could be so different. Yep.
That he's going to be playing with the Saudis for all I know. I have no idea how this is going to play out, man.
Literally, yes. Okay.
Yeah. Last one, because I think this is the point where I find myself paying a lot more attention, getting a lot more involved. But I even think this needs to be tweaked slightly. If your team has a blue chip recruit who plays as a true freshman, this is tough. This is tough to hear. Because you see that guy get in the game and you're thinking to yourself, man, he's a player. This is why he was a top 50 recruit. This is why this guy is going to be the future of this program. All these different things. I get it. Treat that like your team signing that blue chip recruit. Those levels of excitement. Because, man, I'm pre-depressed about what the post-spring transfer portal is going to look like for the class of 2023. The ones who have been on campus for a year and will be making that decision whether or not they want to stay or go. And I'm telling you right now, it's great that your guys are getting into a football game. Maybe they're keeping their red shirt. Maybe they're playing more than 4 games. Whatever the case may be, just tempered, okay? Like, now, Quinshon Judkins, guy like that, steps in, has more rushing yards than any SEC true freshman since a guy named Herschel Walker. Like, all right, there are exceptions to every single rule. That we know. Derek Stingley looks like the best corner that we've ever seen, at least among true freshmen in college football history, or at least one of them. All right, you can get excited. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. But like your guy's getting in 5-6 games, he's a reserve. Just temper your excitement, temper your expectations. It is healthier not to get emotionally attached. And to just look at your team's roster with more fluidity. That's I think what needs to happen for a lot of these teams. And just treat this kind of like a 50-50 split. There's high school recruiting, there's portal recruiting. Personally, I would treat it more as like a 75-25 split. I'd want to be like, hey, I care way more about the guys that are going to help my team next year. I would be a lot more emotionally invested into that. But at the same time, we are human. I think there is something really tantalizing about getting a 3-year stud that your coach signed and turned into a star. Like, the Kentucky reference. There is a certain level of respect for a Wan'Dale Robinson, somebody we talked about on the show a lot. Friend of the show, obviously. And look, Wan'Dale, he is a Kentucky legend for forever, even though he only spent 1 year there. He started his career off at Nebraska. Home state kid, well-documented, part of that 10-win team 2021. But will Wan'Dale and Benny Snell be held in the same regard among Kentucky fans? No way. No way. Snell was a 3-year guy that Stoops signed out of high school. That guy, because of his personality, because of the fact that he did it for 3 years there, he was like the overlooked recruit. That guy is going to be, whenever, like maybe heat of the moment, it felt like Wan'Dale was in that conversation, but all time, like Kentucky fans are like, oh, Snell, yeah, like that was my guy. That was my ride or die, somebody that I look back on and just love to be able to root for, not taking anything from Wandale. There will always be that sense of pride when your guy breaks through from the high school ranks to your college
Mm-hmm.
team and he stays there, just like in pro sports. Even for someone like Drew Brees with your Saints, right? Brees
Mm-hmm.
sort of felt like he was drafted by the Saints in a way because of the shoulder stuff, everybody kind of questioning what was going to happen, the Dolphins trade that was, or the Dolphins free agents thing that wasn't, the Saban sliding doors, all that. And it helped that Brees spent 15 years there. But you get it. Like,
Right.
there is a certain sense of attachment that comes with it. And I'm not saying that you should suddenly stop caring about blue chip recruits who stay and turn into studs, but just appreciate them maybe a little bit more. Appreciate them knowing that they probably had a lot of different temptations to be able to leave that players of the previous generation cannot speak of. And above all else, just don't tweet at any of them who leave. Just don't do that. The don't
Ever.
tweet at recruits era, well, it should be over. It should.
Don't treat it
Don't tweet
players
at
because they might
recruits.
leave, brother. If somebody drops the ball and you add them, they can hit that transfer portal that same day delivery of that transfer portal.
Dude, Amazon, man, it works in recruiting too. It
Yep.
really does. And you don't need Prime to get some of these guys immediately. Like you
Yep.
will be amazed at what these guys endure and the fact that they're going through this process that is now so public to be able to make some of these decisions. It is just a different type of ball game. So hopefully that puts some of this into context as to why I'm not going to sit here and be like start to finish Wednesday nerd out in the same way that I did many years doing this job. I mean, I remember like I was supposed to meet with my brother in like somewhere in Indy for lunch, and I was like, "Hey, Kareem Walker, I think he's going to commit to Michigan. Like, he's, I'm gonna bring my laptop there for the first like 15, 20 minutes. I'm gonna be like working on a story real quick, and then we'll be able to talk. We'll be able to catch up." It's just different. It's
Mm-hmm.
just different. There will still be great moments with the early signing period, but it is entirely changed as a direct result of the portal. Yeah, thoughts on any of that? Will, sorry, I just kind of went off.
No, you're good. Yeah, I think that you've identified something pretty cool here, and I love the data. I love the ability to retain the blue chips, but then to go get them, right? So, just as an example, we talk about a place like Clemson. So they were like fifth in the blue chip rating going into the season, where they're going to get nobody out of the portal, right? So the highest they'll ever be is at that beginning of that season, which is very interesting. And I will say this about Lane Kiffin. And my first thought, like Lane Kiffin's often, is with some snark. And I saw, all these guys going, and I was like, huh, are you still broke? Right. And then, as you're giving this stuff out, I start to realize, okay, actually, you get so much more bang for your buck out of the recruiting, like out of the portal, than you would from recruiting. Because if you think about the process of recruiting, I think the process of recruiting is about to change a ton, right? Because right now, how it's set up is if you're going to get a number one player, if you're going to get a number up like top 100, even top 200 player, let's say that you're okay. We're rebuilding Vanderbilt. Kirby Smart has taken the Vanderbilt job in a different dimension. We're on the staff. We got to do this. What you got to do is be in one of those graphics, right? You got to let him know your name. You got to get his phone number. You got to be on the radar, right? And then you just got to be a little bit of a hater, which Lane Kiffin is amazing at doing, right? Maybe do a little tampering. Not saying Lane's tampering, but I would just be like, oh, wow, no catches for no yards again. That's crazy, right? And these guys are at their schools not getting on the field as a freshman, right? Well, then they enter the portal. Well, we've talked about Clemson doesn't mess with that. We've talked about all these other big schools aren't going to bring in a freshman who used to be a top 200 guy because they got 10 of those guys in one room that have already committed to them. So Ohio State's not going to go be fighting with Ole Miss for a top 200 guy, right? That's where you can make a lot of hay if you're a guy like Lane Kiffin, because you can say, okay, we know this guy can play in the SEC, right? We know this guy can, pass academics. We know this guy can be part of a team in a locker room. He doesn't have off the field concerns. He just isn't getting playing time and he's frustrated. So if you have, let's just make $100 just to make it easy. If you have $100, right? Back in the day, it used to be you'd spend all of that on recruiting, right? And visits and all that. Well, now if you look at the way that Georgia spends on recruiting with all these visits and all the props and all the staff and all that stuff, Indiana, the football team, is not going to go compete with Georgia on a top 100 guy because they don't care on that level. They're more focused on basketball. They're more focused on other things. But suddenly, if a guy leaves, it's like, you want to come be the star here? We can give you a little bit of NIL money. We can give you, all these different things because you're a number one recruit to us, whereas you were a secondary priority to those other teams. So for A&M, a lot of those guys that left were just kind of, they were between A&M and X. It was a close call, and I shouldn't have started A&M, but it goes to show. I realized I was pushing Saban propaganda as you said that, which makes me now more regretful. But that was the take, was that everybody was getting paid and they didn't really want to be there, right? And so now you get the check, you get the experience. And like for the Vandy guys, great example. I'm sure they did the honorable thing their parents wanted them to do. I go get an education, son, go do that. Okay, we tried it that way. Now let's go play at Alabama and go win. You know what I'm saying? Like the offensive lineman did. So point being, you have the deck completely resets after the transfer portal because you've already seen the underbelly of college football as a recruit. Coaches lie to you. Coaches leave. Coaches recruit guys over you. Coaches will get guys out of the transfer portal to play over you, right? So if you're Lane Kiffin, that's his exact style of communication. It's no BS. It's I'm going to come talk to you. We're going to have a real conversation about, hey, at Ole Miss, you got a chance to do this. You got a chance to do that. You want to get to the NFL, or you want to make your family taken care of, or you want to be a baller, all SEC guy. I need players. Here is our communication. Not, I'm going to go recruit this kid. That's the other thing. Spending the resources from the time these kids are 14. I mean, if Nick Saban's been recruiting a kid since the time he's 14, and you're Lane Kiffin, and like you said, you're one of the longest tenured SEC coaches, but you have known this kid since he was 14, right? You've been in there the last couple of years saying, look at the 10-win seasons, look what we've done with our quarterbacks, look at Corral, Dart, all these guys, but you don't get to say, hey, buddy, we won the Heisman in 2009. You have started in a hole when you recruit from the middle and high school level against these Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, these type of guys. So point being, now after that decision is made, now we're forced to be real, which is something that athletes and coaches don't like to do. They're forced to be real towards each other and say, what do you need? What do you want? What do I need? What do I want? Not, your son's going to come here and it's going to change his life and it's going to be forever and he's never going to go anywhere else. So we're going to take care of him and da-da-da. Okay, well, now he's 8th on the depth chart and he's not having any fun and he's missing home. Okay, guess what? Here's what we are. We're near to your home. We're in the middle of the SEC country. We're Ole Miss, right? We play in a fun offense. We have lots of fun over here. That's a fact. You get playtime. We're near your family. It's fun. That's all we care about now. It's not about Herschel Walker and what he did. It's not about, guys back in the 50s and 60s. It's about you today. How can you help our team? And like you said, I think that's so much more impactful because you look at Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow, like all the guys at the Heisman that are transfer guys. Like, it's funny because you said, there probably won't be that guy that changes Maryland. And I'm laughing. And I go, oh, yeah, it's kind of a bad example because Tully is there. Well, he's a transfer. I forgot he was at Alabama for a year. You know what I'm saying? And like, great example. It's like you can get a guy like Jordan Travis for 3-4 years to completely change your program if you want to take a chance on him. But it's a whole different phase of recruiting. I would predict that in a couple of years, there's going to be a recruiting coordinator. And within that, there's going to be a transfer portal coordinator because your pitch over here is completely different. You don't have to win over mom and dad as much and talk about the lifestyle and where you're going to be 4 years from now. You got to talk about, I'm going to get you stats. I'm going to get you eyeballs. I'm going to get you paid. And guys like Lane Kiffin love talking like that. They love talking about measurables, how to have fun, how to look cool, how to do all that stuff. That real like primal base level stuff matters a lot more than the made up, program stuff.
I agree. And if you are skeptical of what Lane has done, and if Lane isn't your favorite person, you're looking at this maybe still with an eyebrow raised, but I would, to your point, say, well, Lane is communicating in a very effective way right now to get to this place. There is no doubt about it whatsoever. And I think that there is something to be said for saying, like, look, I am going to be able to understand how to speak to these kids that have already had some sort of college experience, right? And not everybody's had the same college experience. And there are going to be cases in which you're like, man, I thought that guy was going to be a hit. I remember talking about Zachary Franklin, like he was going to be a big hit in the portal, the guy that got from UTSA. It was this prolific receiver at the group of 5 level. And that ended up just not working out. Who did work out was Trey Harris. A guy they just got from Louisiana Tech. And it was like Lane clearly put that guy into a spot right away and said, look, we're going to figure out if you can play at the SEC level. Caden Prescorn, that's another one for Ole Miss. This guy who steps in as a tight end from Memphis. And once he starts playing and then Michael Trigg, that whole thing happens where he has the Tulane moment, and then after that, I don't know how much of a direct result of that was Priestcorn playing the way that he did, and then it was kind of like, well, this guy is awesome as a run blocker, and we're so much better as a running offense with him. But you can do these things where, like, it almost feels like because of how blunt Lane is as a communicator, that he is set up even better for this to recruit the portal. It doesn't mean he's going to be the best at recruiting the portal forever. And I think that there are certain coaches that if they do shift their priority, like if Saban ever decides, you know what, I'd rather kind of build my roster this way, I would almost feel more comfortable with having these guys that are essentially on like 1-year contracts. I put that in air quotes. It's not officially a contract. It's because we're not employees, whatever. You get what I'm saying. But there are certain guys like that where I feel they would still be extremely good at recruiting and assessing roster needs that way. Saban doesn't have to. Okay. Saban at this point can pick and choose. Kirby, same thing. Those guys are in positions where they can still put a lot of their eggs in that high school recruiting basket. And that is perfectly fine, because if you're winning at that level, I'm not going to tell you need to change the wheel. If you are doing it in the Dabo way and you see that your program has fallen off and you're not willing to address the portal, obviously that's something that we've talked about. You're not adapting, you're dying. You're you're just dying. So it is interesting because I don't think that everybody is in the exact same spot. I don't think even Kentucky and Ole Miss are in the exact same spot, despite the fact that I think they have really similar aspirations with roster building currently. But it is it's going to be very interesting looking at this and how this tracks through the 2020s. We'll wait and see if we have more federal legislation on how these athletes are treated, what can be considered above board to be paid for, what's not, and what is considered, hey, just go out and get it. It's capitalism at its finest. It's still the wild, wild west. Will we still be talking about the portal that way in the year 2028? I don't know. I can't give you that answer. All we know is that for right now, with the lack of restrictions that are in place, yes, there are probably going to be more benefits to recruiting the portal than there are to recruiting at the high school level, and hoping and praying that some of these guys can turn into all conference type players. So I think that that's something that should just be remembered. Just be remembered. And if you're having a really good day on Wednesday, bring yourself back down. If you're having a really bad day on Wednesday and you're like, oh, we got this kid's gone, that kid's gone, just remember there's a lot more that goes into this than just what that signing class ranking looks like now. And that is how the sport has drastically changed.
Yep, that 100%. And I'll say this too, like being from like, you know, all these changes to college football, I texted you this the other day, have completely changed my mindset, which is that like, hey, I was worried about all these different things for the ACC, the Pac-12, the Big 12, the Group of Five, as a college football fan. Now I'm starting to be like, you know what, man, my team is in the SEC. Like, they're going to be good. And that's kind of, as SEC fans, if your school properly prioritizes football, which is pretty much everybody but Vandy, right? At this point, it's like you, and just to say, don't get your hopes up if you're Vandy, right? I mean, come on, when you guys start caring, then it'll start working. And we've seen Vandy be successful in our lifetime. It's not impossible. You just got to care. But point being, you know, our teams all care, and they all have enough money to at least get someone out of the portal. And here's a really important part of this I'm realizing. They're all from, pretty much 80% of the SEC are very fertile recruiting grounds, right? Talking about Texas, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, you know what I'm saying? And these places, you know, we've seen all these crazy amount of UL transfers do well, you know, across the SEC. We've seen guys from Florida that are 3 stars that go play at some random school and then come back and they end up at a bigger school. And so the schools that are set up better than ever, because we've seen LSU get a bunch of guys from the portal that were in-state recruits that went somewhere else. And you'll probably see this more in a Florida or a Georgia, where they end up at Clemson, Ohio State, out west. And then they look around and they go, wait a minute, I've already gotten my check or whatever. All the promises are starting to not come through. I miss my family. I want to go home. And when that happens, then now, you know, it was this big embarrassment. If you're an LSU fan, you don't get the in-state guy. Well, Denver Harris is now on the team. Now, is he playing? No, but he's on the roster. And that's what's important. We would love to have Denver Harris on the field, but having him on the roster is the next best option. And so, point being, all these guys Brian Kelly is getting back are guys from U High that wanted to get away from home, realized they didn't like it, And so being specific about what you want in the portal. Think about the point about Priestcorn versus Trigg is such a good one. We need a run blocking tight end. Suddenly all the stars for Trigg don't matter because he can't run block. You know what I'm saying? We want this type of guy. Oh, well, let's look around. Let's look who's from here. Let's look who's from here playing at Arkansas State, balling out there. Let's see if we could, make a connection, figure it out. So I think not only just having the money, having the care, having the resources, having the conference and the TV deal, but also being from these places that are football hotbeds, more and more guys are starting to come home because once they've made their hay somewhere else, now they have the ability. The guy that's coming to LSU, the Mississippi State player, didn't get an offer. Now it's because Brian Kelly was transitioning and just didn't have the time to get around to it because he was trying to land Walker Howard and stuff, but didn't get an offer from LSU. Wanted to play. That was his dream school. Boom. Now he can live his dream. And say what you will about that. It sounds dirty, whatever. If that guy's dream was to play at LSU and LSU wants him, he should be able to do that. And that's awesome. And it works for everyone. Not as much for like the schools, but if you're an SEC guy, you're not cheering for a feeder school. You're not. You're going to cheer for Kentucky, where you're getting guys from all over the country, up north, out east, just to come play in the SEC, and it's awesome.
Three-star guy spends 2-3 years in Group of 5 strength and conditioning program. All of a sudden, that guy looks way different than he did as a recruit. And instead of being like, oh, we had to take a chance on this in-state kid and like roll the dice on him, you didn't have to use your resources. And instead, you go out and you say, yep, we're going to bring that guy on board. And that's just a very 2020s way to build a roster now. And that is kind of what a lot of these coaches, even the coaches who are kind of like, yeah, we need restrictions over the portal, we need to do this, they're not going to be as portal reliant. They can still look at that and see it as a way that it can benefit their team. And I think it will continue to do that. And I'm in support of that. And it's okay to feel conflicted about this as well. I'm not saying that you have to feel like the portal is the best thing since, ironically enough, sliced bread. But I do think that there is a certain bit of acceptance that just has to come with it at this point. And if you're resisting it, like you're going to lose that battle.
Yep. And let me say one thing too. It's, we were really really big on the talent composite and talent wins. And that you're right. That's how it used to be. And I'll say now it's more about talent evaluation. Okay. It's about what do we have on the roster? Let's take an honest look at ourselves. Do we need a quarterback? Do we need to go get competition to get our quarterback better? What level of transfer quarterback do we need to get? If you're LSU and you have Nussmeier, maybe you don't go after the guy from NC State or you don't push him very hard because that would make Nuss leave. Maybe you go for an AJ Swan and say, okay, well, maybe this would be a battle if we do get AJ Swan. So that type of stuff where it's talent evaluation, where for none of this stuff is happening. These are just things that have been talked about. I'm not reporting anything here, obviously, but it's like for LSU, if they were to end up with Swan, which they're likely not at this point, then it's, okay, well, now we have a battle. Okay, that's a different conversation than we're going to go bring in Jaden Daniels, right? It's different from that. And keeping your guys on, saying we think we know what we have with this guy, but we're not sure. We want some like insurance policy. That's a completely different pitch out of the portal than you're giving like a Vandergriff, where it's like, dude, get down here. We're gonna treat you like a 5-star. You're the dude. You know what I'm saying?
It is different, entirely different. I think guys seek that transparency, and it doesn't mean it works out for everybody, and it doesn't mean that every promise is granted, but it does give guys a better chance to just lift their head up. Sometimes that's all these guys need to be able to succeed, and hopefully that'll put guys in better spots moving forward. All right, let's kick it to Sean Weatherspoon, one of those guys that I had never talked to, and by the end of the conversation, I felt like I had known him for 10 years. Great dude. I love what he's doing with his new ventures. So here is Sean. Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is former Mizzou star Sean Weatherspoon. Sean is now co-owner of Legacy Sports Complex in suburban Atlanta, along with some other former Falcons. Mohamed Sanu's involved, Christian Blake, Elijah Wilkinson. This is a 15,000 square foot facility that offers group, private, semi-private training for all athletes of all shapes and sizes. I mean, it's kind of crazy the amount of things that you guys offer with football, wrestling, lacrosse, baseball, softball, soccer, adult boot camp. I know you're trying to get basketball as part of it as well. I'm just a 33-year-old guy who likes sports. And even I'm like reading this going, this sounds like a place I would want to spend all my time. Before we get to some Mizzou things, some career things with you, tell me about kind of why you wanted in on Legacy Sports Complex.
Well, first and foremost, I'm all about positivity, all about giving back. And, this is a community that's given me a lot. and I still live here, you know. So it almost makes sense. I have young kids I have an 8-year-old daughter, a 7-year-old son, 4-year-old daughter, and an 8-month-old boy, and they're going to be in the gym. And I think we kind of lose that in the community today. When I was little, you could just see where everybody's bikes were, and that's where everybody was getting their training at. If that was video games, they were in the house, about to get kicked out to go in the field and play some football, some baseball, kickball, basketball. I mean, we just figured out a way to get after it. But I think these days it's a little bit more. You need to be a little bit more detailed. And so if you can get the kids going at a young age and in a community where it's about competition and getting better, I think it's just going to help them. And so that's what made sense for me, man. Being around great people like Muhammad, Dustin, Shavanik, Christian Blake. I haven't met Elijah yet, but he's on board. Johnny Venters, former All-Star baseball player for the Braves here. We got a few good guys that, want to do something special, want to see the kids grow and have an opportunity the way we had an opportunity. And as well as sports, you get a chance to learn how to be good teammates, be good people, and just be around good people.
I think when you think of specialized or private, semi-private training, a lot of people assume that means specializing in specific sports. And I know you grew up playing a bunch of different sports, even into high school. This is kind of like the blending of those two things and getting kids that want to play a lot of other things. And you guys offer expertise on a lot of those different things. What are your thoughts on that overall, and having kids that do have seasonal activities? And it's not just, I'm going to play football 365 days a year, baseball 365 days a year, whatever it is, and having kids get that all around experience.
Well, I think it's awesome. And like when I mentioned the group, it's an eclectic group. Dustin, he's done MMA gyms for years. Johnny, his expertise in baseball, myself, Muhammad, Christian in football, Elijah, we're outsourcing people to come in and do things that we don't necessarily, know. And that's going to be, something that the kids can be introduced to different things, not just football, not just basketball. We offer classes in wrestling. We offer classes in tumbling, for cheerleaders and gymnastics. It just goes, it expands across a wide wavelength. And I think that's something that's going to make the kids a little bit more well-rounded in their athleticism. And, we're not just going to focus on the athleticism part of it, because you're going to have to be a good person if you're going to be in Legacy Sports Complex. And we're going to keep that standard up.
Let's talk a little Mizzou. For the YouTube audience, you can see Sean is rocking a fire Mizzou hoodie. That thing is absolutely sweet. I love that.
Shout out to Truman and my guys at Mizzou for getting me laced up.
I love it, man. That logo, it's sweet. I gotta think that for guys like you, a season like this is so fun, because you're in locker rooms where so many of those guys, it's like it's Alabama, it's Ohio State, it's Georgia, and those guys are just flexing all the time. Did you clap back a little bit extra this year? I know you don't have a locker room to go to anymore, but Did you clap back a little bit extra, kind of like Drink was doing pretty much the whole season?
I was standing on business, just like Drink. So the head coach at Tennessee, I won't even say his name. I like him too. He's a Mizzou guy as well. He was our coordinator a few years ago. But man, it's just been a great ride this year to be able to put your hoodie on and be, represent your alma mater. And you definitely got to clap back, man, because trust me, these people kick you when you're down. Did you see those preseason rankings? I think Missouri was about 13th, I want to say, in the conference. And that, to me, maybe that was something that they thought was going to be our season, but just knowing a little bit about the program and a little bit about Drink and the type of players we've been picking up here lately, you've obviously got a feeling that, these guys are some players, and they're going to be some guys that you're going to see not only be successful in the SEC, but they're going to move on to the next level as well. And it's been a great year, man. I got a chance to go to a couple games, took my son out to Mizzou for the LSU game. Of course, the Heisman Trophy, winner would give us hell and kick our butt a little bit, but we played well that game, played well enough to win that game at home. Then I went out between the hedges. And so the two games I went to, we haven't won. But I tell you what, I had a great time watching TV and celebrating those Tigers wins with my babies. Got a couple guys that played at throughout the SEC that I chat with, and some guys that I play with here in Atlanta. We still keep in touch. So the group chat, I've definitely been sticking my chest out in the group chat.
I don't blame you one bit. And look, I was one of those people. I was a doubter. I had Mizzou at 6-6 coming into the year. And at the same time, I looked at this team and what they did last year by bringing in Blake Baker and seeing how different that defense looked, especially against the run. And it just felt like guys were in such better spots to succeed. Can you explain kind of why scheme matters and why it doesn't necessarily have to just come down to talent level on that side of the ball, and it can turn around a group that quickly when they bring in the right defensive coordinator and know where exactly guys need to be lined up?
It's very important, to have the type of guys that you want to run your scheme, but to get the guys comfortable with your scheme. And you could see later on in the season when we had our injuries on defense, we didn't miss a beat. We're missing Hopper, who's probably a first-round pick, and the other one, and also Bailey, who went out earlier than that. We're missing those guys, and the other guys who came in to fill in were guys that were, they were in the right spot, they were getting people lined up, and they were out there attacking the football, man. And you could just see it's a different brand when kids know what they're gonna do, they know what to do, they can go out there and play fast. So you maybe you don't know this guy's name, but yeah, if you watch him play this week, I'm pretty sure you'll see a couple splash plays. Then the next week, you'll see it again. This isn't a fluke. And we're missing some of our best guys. Enos Rakestraw missed quite a bit of time. And, Chris, I'll mess up his name. I don't want to mess it up. But number 7, our All-American nickel and cornerback.
Abram Strain, yeah.
That's how you say it. Man, the kid played his tail off. Was one of our best tacklers, as well as doing a good job of getting the ball out. And, a lot of people don't know these guys. But, hey, turn on the tape. You turn on the tape, and they stick out. And I think that's a testament to Drinkwitz getting the right defensive coordinator in here, as well as playing complementary football with the offense, because the offense did a great job as well running that football. When you can run that football in the SEC and you can play good defense, you'll be in a good situation.
Yeah, as much as this team kind of came out of nowhere and everybody talks about talent level, I think it's going to be one of those teams that we look back on 5 years from now. And we're like, oh, that guy's in the NFL. Oh, that guy's in the NFL. And on both sides of the ball, I think that there are NFL players just kind of all over the place in that group. And that might be surprising to people that haven't paid as close of attention. What's your unbiased prediction for the bowl game against Ohio State?
And, all year, talking about Missouri's ranking, talking about Georgia's ranking, Alabama. That was me and my 7-year-old son's talk. He's like, Dad, what do we rank? What's Georgia? What's Alabama? What's LSU? Like, he wanted to know. Once I took him to Mizzou to see that game this year, LSU, he was just all about the college football rankings. And I say that to say there was always one other team that he would always talk about. And it was the team that we're going to play in the Cotton Bowl, because he'd always say, Ohio State. It was almost like they were part of the SEC. But, they're not, obviously, but their ranking was just at the top. And he kept seeing Ohio State. His best friend is Muhammad Sanu's son. They call him MJ. And MJ is from Ohio. Obviously, Muhammad played there. And so Ohio State's been on our radar. This is a game that we have to go into with the right mindset throughout the bowl practices to simulate the looks that we're going to get. But we know that it's going to be a battle of defenses. Their defense has been solid for years. Man, you could just put on the tape and you got 6 or 7 guys that are going to be, in the first 3 rounds of the draft. They've been more like an SEC North team, if you want to say. But, man, I think it's a great matchup for us because it gives us a chance to show the world that, it's not like the Big Ten is better than the SEC, but the Big Ten is a premier conference, top 5. I want to give them their respect, but we've been against the guys all year long, and man, we put up great results against everyone. We moved the ball against everyone. We never really just got our butts kicked. We had some tough games, but we never really just went out there and laid an egg. So I got to expect us to go down to Dallas and pick up some nice recruits in the DFW area, because we're going to go out and put on a show, man. And best of luck to Ohio State. I know they're going to come prepared, but I think the Tigers are going to be excited. This is a big bowl game. It's the biggest bowl game we've had in years. I played in this bowl game in 2008. So I'm super excited to go and check out my Tigers and meet up with some of the guys. My boy Macklin just went into the College Football Hall of Fame. It'll be a good time for the guys to get together and celebrate him as well. And hopefully we'll get a win.
You talk about Mizzou having a little bit of recruiting success in Texas. It's kind of crazy. The unheralded guys, yourself included, who have been just plucked out of that state. Nick Bolton, the Chase Daniel, Michael Sam, like all these guys that you're just like, where do these guys come from? Like, how do they get overlooked? What do you remember about going through that process and being this unheralded two-star recruit, even though you did all these things that suggested you shouldn't have been a two-star
Mm-hmm.
recruit as like a multi-sport type guy? But what do
Mm-hmm.
you remember about going through that process and why Mizzou stood out to you?
Wow, man. When you talk about that, we got to go back to '05. Being a contributor on the class of '05, my high school team was one of the best classes that my high school has seen. My class is '06, and so we made state for that '05 fall. And man, it was a tough go for us, man. We lost the state championship game, lost a lot of guys, and then we're coming back that senior year, and Hurricane Rita came through Jasper, Texas, and just kind of tore it apart, man. So we left home for like a month and a half, didn't know if we'd even resume our football activities. And when we went back to Jasper, our whole town was operating on generators because
Wow.
the trees were down, the lines were down. It was something serious, man. We played 2 games a week, one game on Tuesday, one game on Saturday, both daytime games. At this time, my recruiting trail is kind of taking a hit because my family is running all over Texas trying to figure out, where we can be safe. And so, some reason, man, Matt Eberflus, shout out to E. I think he got him a win this weekend. He's been having a little rough go, but I'll tell you what, that
Yep.
guy is a detail guy. He's a defensive guy, and he came to my parents' house and sat there with that salt shaker and that pepper shaker, and we talked about a little bit, the cover two defense that I think Rod Marinelli was running with the Bears, ironically. And he's like, "This is Erlacher. We have a middle linebacker. His name is Brock Christopher, good player, and you're gonna be this guy." And that was Lance Briggs. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be the Will, and we're going through that, and it just felt like a great fit for me. And like I said, man, my phone was kind of cold during that time, so it was a great opportunity for me to keep connecting with Mizzou, and they always connected on a strength of more than just football. It was about my parents. It was about what I was doing with my other sports. They wanted to know about me, and it didn't seem like I was just a quota for their recruiting class. And so, man, here I am, a two-star recruit. I get to campus for 7-on-7, and there's a few other guys from Texas that just didn't get a lot of love. One guy named Denario Alexander, one of my best friends. His names really stand out because he threw up 1,800 yards his last year at Missouri, playing receiver. So we had some guys that kind of just grew into what they were already were, but Missouri just cultivated us a little bit better. And I think it was just the right situation. Big 12 football was very exciting at the time. And it was a place that, we had been watching that growing up in Texas. They said, "Hey, we like you, but I don't know." Texas A&M, they said, "We think we're gonna go with some JUCO guys that are I don't know, So I went to junior day at some of these programs and hung around and just didn't feel like I was a part of their plans. Houston was the place where Art Browse was and that I felt really comfortable going to, but Missouri was my first visit. I had a soft verbal to Houston. I took my visit. Art just kind of laid into Mizzou and me a little bit, and I was like, "Oh, this is not the type of vibe I want." Because Coach Pinkel was like, go see what you want to see." Like he's like, "You're a Big 12 guy." He just say something so simple like that. And I always thought that, Coach Pinkel didn't come to my house. When I took my visit, I got a chance to speak with him. And that pissed me off that he didn't come to my house. So when I went to school, man, I was ready to go. And Macklin was our number one recruit. We're best friends now, but I was like, man, this guy's arrogant. This guy's, he turned down Oklahoma to come to Missouri. He thinks he's the you know what, and he was the you know what. And we all just became the best of friends. And man, we competed. And there was a guy named Kevin Rutland who played corner at Missouri. He was a corner and nickel. He's from Houston as well. He's from North Shore, so his pedigree is, North Shore. They just made their sixth straight championship. So I don't know if I lost you there. Oh, it just went out. But Kevin was the kid he's the only kid from Texas that didn't come to Missouri's summer program. He's like, "Man, I must enjoy my last summer in Texas and vibe and chill." And so he was kind of nonchalant, played quarterback, ended up redshirting him, and he ended up being our best friend and one of our roommates. And I promise you, my whole house went to the NFL because we cared that much, man. We wanted to win. We ended up being the winningest, Missouri program, and of course, the next class after us, the next class after them, and it was just something that was contagious, man. But we had a lot of guys that nobody really, talked about that went out there with a chip on their shoulder and put on for their state as well as the name on the front of their jersey in Missouri as well.
It's incredible because, everybody always assumes that when you get to that level and you play Power 5 football, that you just have all these unlimited options. And hearing you explain your situation, I bet there are a lot of moments in which you're like, I don't know that I'm going to be doing this at the college level. I feel like I have the ability, but what are they seeing that I'm not necessarily, or what's preventing them from stepping forward and saying, no, you're going to be a guy, you're going to be that stud. Is there a school that you were most salty about? Because I know you bring up the Houston Art Briles thing, but is there between the Texas A&M, like you just talked about, is there one of those schools that over the course of your career, you said to yourself, every time they show up, I'm going to make them realize that they made a mistake by passing me up?
It was more so the coaches that were recruiting me, because I would have a coach and he'd be like, man, I love you. But like Bradley Dale Pivotal. He was linebacker coach, defensive coordinator at LSU. He coached with Bo Pelini, coached under Les Miles. He would say, I got to get you out here to run around, see if Les will pull the trigger. And so it seemed like when I got to LSU, went to their camp, that's a little east of where I'm from. I get out there, shoot, I make the MVP team at the camp. I'm thinking, man, I did everything I was supposed to do. Like, oh, you're a little small. Texas showed up at my 707 practices. They were like, we already got 3 linebackers we got signed up. Yeah, and you're small. Everybody just kept saying you're small. And then they were so disrespectful. I went to junior day. They didn't speak to me almost. And then here it is, like Dennis Franchione was the coach then. And I think they might have called on signing day, seeing if they could, get me in there. But man, when I played Texas, I had my best game at Missouri. I probably had like 17 tackles. I had a sack. I had a pick. And Mac Brown came up to me after the game. He said, I just don't know how we let you slide by. And I'm like, yeah, that was the validation I needed at the time. Even though they kicked our butts that night, man, I had my best game, and it was homecoming, and my family was in town. It was a great time. But every time that I would, face those coaches, or it would be those teams that pop up, I would definitely be a little bit more amped up. And sometimes that's tough. It gets you kind of out of your game sometimes. But, I mean, I did have some of my best games against A&M, some of my best games against Texas. So, I got to say that they helped me in some way.
Okay, so I hate to bring up bad memories, but
no, Oklahoma. No.
All right, we got to talk about this, because the 2007 season, it's crazy. It's well documented how crazy it was. It's kind of is this season about to be 2007? Like, we ask it every time there's craziness, because everybody remembers just how wild it was. And the fact that you guys at Mizzou are sitting there number 1 in the country going into conference championship weekend, just knowing, all right, we just beat Kansas. All we've got to do is just beat Oklahoma. That's it. If we beat Oklahoma, we're playing for a national championship. How sick to this day are you about that? Especially hearing now about the LSU side, about them overlooking you and them getting into the national championship as a 2-loss team.
Oh, it was tough. It was tough, man. I look at that and I'm like, are you kidding me? We beat Illinois and we beat Kansas. Both of those teams played in BCS bowl games. I want to say Kansas beat Virginia Tech in the Orange Bowl. And I think USC might have got after Illinois. I got to give USC their just due. But we were the only team who beat 2 BCS teams that didn't make a BCS bowl. So that was kind of rough. We knew that, our destiny was in our hands, but we just did not think that we would not get a big bowl game, and we ended up getting the Cotton Bowl, which was awesome. But man, we were so amped up to go to San Antonio and play against Oklahoma, because they had already beaten us in the regular season. And it was like a 1-score game. Like it was tight, man. We needed to make one play. They made it. We didn't, right? And so when we made the championship game, we were just revved up. But I think in the beginning of the season, when we talked about our goals, we knew that we couldn't, we were coming off. This is our first year being like a top team. Like, we had a team in 05. They're like preseason ranked. But the 06 Missouri team, I think we finished 8-5. No, sorry, maybe 8-4. So we're pretty good. We got Chase Daniels, so I know we're going to get better. He's the guy that kind of, you're like, okay, Chase is going to Mizzou. We saw what he did. I'm a Texas kid. I know, okay, we're going to win some games. We got to go up there and play some defense, right? And so here we are, bro, getting the opportunity going to San Antonio to play against OU. And I'm thinking, we got this one. And we come out, we're playing pretty good. But I think we got a little too cute in the game. We kind of tried some little trick plays here, trick plays there. And really, we probably should have just did what we did. Because if you look at our guys that stand on 2 feet and you look at their guys that stand on 2 feet, we had the superior edge there. Now, when you talk about the defensive line and the offensive line, their trenches were just a little bit too much for us to match. And so they ran that counter. and they got after us. It was similar to being on Atlanta's team in the second half of that 2012 NFC Championship game versus the 49ers, where they just, they ran the power second half. They didn't get any big runs. They ran the power, controlled the clock, and came back. And so I don't think we ever got up on them, but I remember the time it was 17-17, and you're thinking, okay, this game should be a good game. And I don't think we scored after that, man. So that was tough, man. And I see the similarities, and I'm just glad we didn't get gypped, on like a bad bowl game this year, because there's been times where, sometimes you think you think you've done enough. You're gonna get a good bowl game, but hey, the committee was a little different back then. That BCS thing was wild. I know the college football playoff is wild, but hopefully next year, we'll get a true champion. I think it'll be a true champion for college football.
Yeah, it's the sport has changed in how we talk about bowl games since that happened, but Georgia's kind of experiencing what you guys did, and I know it's different circumstances because they were coming off the two-time defending national champs and all that stuff.
Right, they're being even more disrespectful.
But yeah, like you go into conference championship, #1 in the country. You're like, everything's in front of you. This is we're going to go to a national championship. We're going to play for it. And I'm not saying that they counted their chickens before they hatched, but be honest, the motivation factor going into a bowl game when you lose out on that national championship path and knowing, oh man, this is not going to be what we thought it was in this bowl game. It's got to be harder to get going for the next game. And I know you guys crushed Arkansas in the bowl game, so maybe maybe you might be the wrong person to ask this to, because you guys showed up plenty motivated, ready to go. But is there something to be said for the motivation thing, or do we make too big of a deal of that?
No, I definitely think if you have a team where all these kids are going to the NFL, this like my team, like our Missouri team, I can't say that we just all like had this arrogance, like we're all going pro, we're all getting drafted. It wasn't like 6 or 7 of us was going first round. Now there were, 4 or 5 first round talents on those teams at Missouri. And let's see, myself, William Moore, Chase Daniel didn't get drafted, but hell, he had the longest career. Jeremy Macklin, first round pick, Ziggy Hood, first round pick, Chase Kaufman, Mackey Award winner, 3rd round pick, didn't even work out for his coming out of for the draft and anything, still get drafted in the first round. So we're a talented team, but we were just we're so upset that we just wanted to go kick somebody's butt, man. I think the SEC has kind of been spoiled, and they're like, oh, we're not playing because I talked to Mike Johnson, who played tackle at Alabama. He was drafted here with me in Atlanta in the 3rd round. And Mike's like, when Hawaii whooped up on them, he's like, man, whatever, bro. We're checked out. We're checked out. And that's what people are going to say, But I always say, anytime you get a chance to show who you are, why not go show who you are, man? If you don't want to play, don't play. Go train. Go get ready. But it shouldn't be any letdown if we step on this field, because you never know which play's your last play, man. We got to go out here, put our best foot forward. And when I played against Darren McFadden, Felix Jones, and Peyton Hillis on that day, you can't tell me I didn't make money that day.
Yeah.
You can't tell me I didn't and I was just a sophomore, but you can't tell me I didn't do what I was supposed to do. We went out there, held them to like 6 points. Man, that was big for me. Playing against those backs, that let me know. Because coming into that sophomore year, the freshman year, I'm pretty good. I want to play. I'm not playing. We're not that great. But our scout team, we were getting better. We're getting better and getting better. We knew we'd play together the next year. And so that next year, I stepped right in. I'm like, man, I'm all big league. I'm all league player. And I didn't know that was going to happen. I went out there and gave it my best shot. And so the next year, shoot, man, I did the same thing. The next year, I did the same thing. And that put me in position to do the things that I wanted to do after Missouri. So I think my advice to these kids and coaches would be, put your best foot forward, or just, hey, you can just go study for your finals, man, and just say, hey, it's a wrap. We don't want to play. I wanted some bowl gifts. I wanted some, we got all my bowl games were in Texas. I'm a Texas kid. We drive home, we drive to the bowl game, we get money for the mileage. I mean, there's a lot of incentives. These kids got the NIL deals now. So they may be thinking a little bit different than the way we were thinking. But we were just wanting to put our best foot forward and help our ranking for the end of the season to help get some better players in there so we can keep it going.
Chase Daniel seems like just such a fun guy to play with. Like, he seems like the best. I loved him as a Bears fan. Like, I loved him those few seasons that he spent in Chicago. We're seeing him really shine in the media world now. What's the story about Chase that you always kind of remember that kind of personifies who he is?
Man, I think one of the coolest stories about Chase, and I just got a call from Jeremy Macklin. He was just calling me. Chase was really big in getting J-Mac to school there. J-Mac was committed to OU, man. He was going to play with those guys. He was going to play he was going to win Big 12 championships and play in the national championship, right? So I think it says a lot about Chase and what he did to where he was able to sway Jeremy. And so when Jeremy came to summer school, Jeremy wasn't going to summer school. His summer school was Chase's house. And they were just locked in, man. So just seeing how locked in Chase was and how confident he was, and just he's just a team first guy, a fiery guy, a great player, and a teacher too. So I remember him and Jeremy just sitting there going over plays. Here I am, I'm like, I know I ain't playing this year. I'm thinking I'm a 210-pound linebacker. I'm like, man, I'm gonna be red shirted. I'm not even worried about it. Jeremy's coming in. He's like, I'm not coming here to red shirt. I'm not. Chase is like, this is gonna be, this guy's gonna put us on the stage, right? Chase knew it, and Chase was ready for the stage, and him and Jeremy, they really set the tone for, Missouri having those accolades. I mean, I think Chase was up for the Heisman, Jeremy's up for the Biletnikoff. They put us on the stage, man. So kudos to Chase and Jeremy. Chase looking like DJ Drama right now with the big beard, wearing the snapback hats and stuff. Like when we went back to Mizzou, I'm like, man, this dude look like a hip hop star. And then you see him, on NFL Network, having a great time, just excited, man. And he can really give you a different perspective because, he's been in so many meeting rooms and learned from so many different, offensive minds. And, he's been successful when he's been called upon. And just an overall, just a great guy, man. So, kudos to Chase, man. But just his dedication to getting us ready to play. I saw him working with Jeremy as a freshman, just getting that guy ready, man. I'll never forget that.
Yeah, there's a reason why the guy has been able to hold a clipboard for so long. Everybody always brings up the amount of money per start and all these different things. Like, if that guy wasn't liked, there's no way that he'd be getting these contracts and be asked to come into these locker rooms. You getting drafted by the Falcons, it probably played a big part in what you're doing now in the Atlanta area, obviously with Legacy Sports Complex. Do you think that going to Atlanta, like at the time, did you think that was the most likely destination for you? Or did you think based on your pre-draft interviews, those conversations, that you were going to end up somewhere else?
Man, I really couldn't pinpoint it, but I will say that Arthur Blank was the only owner in the meeting. He was the only owner in a meeting. And I was the guy that, they wanted to talk to me. Like I had like 20 something official interviews, not only just going to the train station over there at the combine, talking to the position coaches and defensive coordinators and stuff, but like I'm literally sitting in like every team room, and their whole front office is right there just grilling you, right? But during that process, I was the one who was reaching out to Atlanta. Like in the media, they talk to me, what team do you feel comfortable? I'm like, I want to go to Atlanta. I kept saying, I want to go to Atlanta. William Moore, he left Missouri. He came to Atlanta. He was a second-round pick. And Mo didn't play much his first year. So when they came to recruit me, they were like, hey, we want to get both of you guys out there, get both of you guys going, right? And so that was kind of a thing. I had played with him past 3-4 years. So that seemed like a great fit for me. And so I kind of thought it would happen, but I didn't know. I was just kind of, every chance I got, I would speak about Atlanta. Because I was born in Greenville, South Carolina. So I'm a guy that's, from around these parts per se. Grew up in Texas my whole life, but I was born here in South Carolina, which is right up the street. Got a lot of family that's, here in this area. And it just felt like a place where I could go and be in a 4-3 defense that was very similar to what I had already done at Missouri. And, it seemed like a place, I just love the energy of this city, man. It's just, they're going to make you earn it. If you're going to put together a subpar team and a subpar type of, season, then that's what the crowd's going to be like. But if you come out there and you got your stuff together and you're getting after it and you're putting on for the city, then the city is going to be behind you. And then you have the faithfuls as well that are just going to always be there. But when you get that building rocking and you got a playoff game in there where you can't hear, the cornerback can't hear the linebacker got to run outside the numbers to tell Asante Samuel that we're in cover 2 because we don't want to give away our hand signals. I mean, it's just a different vibe, man. So coming here was the ideal place. I was talking to Devin McCourty here recently. We were at this trust event, the NFL trust event in DC, and I was saying the only thing I envy is not getting drafted by Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
Now I love Mike Smith, so detailed, such a like a student of the game, but he only got, let's see, how 5 or 6 years here. But can you imagine if your coach has been here so long and the same system is the same? Like, I put 3-4 different defensive coordinators and things like that. So that's the only kind of things, you think about as a player, like just the continuity and schemes and personnel. But man, I wouldn't change it for the world, man. Just a great place. And I'm still here today. And this place is still giving me what I need.
Julio gets there in your second season. when that guy walks in the door as a defensive player, how quickly do you know that he's just going to be that guy?
Oh my goodness. It's just his intent. His intent, man, like everything he did, like when he came off that ball, man, it was no sugar footing. I was gonna say another word. Man, he was rolling everything, full speed, and I look at myself on defense. They were trying to slow me down over there. Like, Spoon, chill, bro. You ain't got I am running. Julio is running. Then you have to go and play certain techniques on receivers, and you really get a chance to see, hold up. Ooh, that's different, right? And so if you can go out there and go against these guys, a guy like Julio, Roddy White, Tony Gonzalez, Mike Turner, Matt Ryan being as accurate as he was, you knew that on Sundays you'd be ready to play anybody. And when you look at Julio, they called him the Predator when he first got here. He had the dreads. I mean, the guy was just phenomenal. I think his first touchdown catch against Indianapolis up on the road was just one of those catches I'll never forget. I think his knees hit the ground before he caught the ball, but he's diving and he makes the catch on the ground. And the three defensive backs, Antoine Bethea, Gerard Powers, and I want to say one more, I can't remember. But they're like, oh, it's incomplete. You look on the Jumbotron and you see like the type of plays that this guy can make just day in and day out, man. The consistency, the hands, and never said a word. Julio, he just the quietest guy, fiery, though, just ready to go out there and win for his team. And he always had a lot to say about Coach Nick Saban. And I think he has some similarities there because Gary Pinkel was under Nick Saban, and who they both were under Don James. And so that program was similar, and we kind of knew you had to come and work. It wasn't you were recruited here and you're going to be, no, everything had to be earned. And even though Julio was drafted as high as he was, I mean, he went about his business as if he was the last man on the roster. So big ups to Julio.
What's the biggest thing that we don't understand looking at it from the outside that you endured as an NFL player playing defense? How about in the NFL? What's the biggest kind of like overlooked thing for those who haven't been in the trenches like you?
Ooh, I think the biggest overlooked thing just in ball period, I'll say defense because that's my perspective, but how many teams are really trying to win it?
Mm.
You literally could be on a team and you're looking at your offseason moves, you're looking at the guys you're standing next to, you're looking at the guys that are out there playing, and that guys that you're leaning on, and you might be like, man, this ain't it. And there's not like some drastic thing that's gonna happen at the trade deadline, like where you're gonna just get a whole new team, So I mean, I can remember times where I just feel like, man, this is not it. We don't have a chance. And so some of these teams, the fans, they get into it on Twitter about this, that, and the third, but sometimes you just don't stand a chance. And a playoff, game is your Super Bowl, and be happy with that. So I think just, from year to year, it's going to be different, but man, it's so hard to win in that league. And when you see certain traits, you just know, like, man, we're going to have a hard time winning games. I think people, they take that for granted, man. They just think like last year when we did good, okay, we're going to be good this year. No, man, that thing changes every year. And it just sucks to see your brothers go to other cities, guys not play anymore, and guys get injured and those type of things. The business part of it, that's what they don't understand really hurts the mental of the players, because we have to separate the business from our personal lives, and we know that every move isn't always, it seems like it's personal, but it's not personal, it's business. And sometimes I think we can just get lost in that, and that can kind of stress guys out. But I would just say, fans, please take it easy on the guys on Twitter. These guys, these are these men's livelihood. They love what they're doing. They're trying the best they can. Give this better luck next week. And maybe, in the offseason, your team will make some moves to make you feel better. But hey, the game's got to be played on the field.
But what about if they lose out on one of their bets, or it's their fantasy player or something like that? They'll, that should open the door for them to be able to slide into the DMs and let a specific player know about that, right? Like that's fine.
I'd say so, man. I might have tweeted Teddy Bridgewater on a fantasy game one night. And like, but it's all fun, not. But to me, hey, they say if you can't lose it, then don't bet it.
It's true. That's a good point.
But hey, if you do slide in the DMs, just be gentle with the guys, man. They got a lot on their plates.
John, it's been a lot of fun. I want to get you out here on some rapid fire. Just 5 questions. First thing that comes to mind. Does that work?
Sweet, bro.
All right. I think I know the answer to this question. First one, though. Who was on the receiving end of your favorite tackle of your football career?
Ooh, my favorite tackle, RG3.
Oh,
RG3. He was on the receiving end of that, man. I won't say it's my favorite tackle because he was hurt or anything like that. It was just like when you get to run through someone's body unimpeded, that feeling is like hitting a golf ball down the fairway 315 yards. So, and that's what I love to do, right? So, man, that was the hit where it's like, oh my goodness, that felt so great. So I got to say, that's my favorite one right there. RG3, sorry, bro, but it's all love.
he did just fine. He's doing
Oh,
all right. He's got things
he's
figured out. Yeah.
he's crunk right now too, man.
Yeah.
Got some, yeah, I like that.
Bench, squat, or deadlift?
Squat, squat, man. You got to live in the squat rack, man. If you're gonna, especially if you're gonna do the job I did, you better have some thump to you. Because one thing about me, I didn't always have to run full speed and try to hit a guy with all my might. I had a lot of power in my lower legs to where I could sit down low and I could come off a block and still explode in a short area. And I like to say turn the cheeks. You gotta turn cheeks when you make tackles, man. I don't see that a lot in the NFL today. And maybe they don't want you to see that. But for me, squat rack all day.
You had a 40-inch vertical coming out of college. Can you still dunk? And if so, do you just do that all the time? Because I would.
Man, I can still get up there and punch one. It's not the same. I'm not throwing it down. I can punch one though. I can get it up there. So every now and then, if I'm at LA Fitness and somebody's they find that I played in the league and now here they want to try some, I might get a little revved up. It just depends on how the old 87 is feeling. I'm saying if the 87 is crunk up and feeling good, just came out of the sauna, stretched out, rolled out, hey man, I might try to punch one on you and just let you know, hey, it ain't sweet in here.
The old 87. I'm gonna refer to myself now whenever I do something athletic. The old 90, because that's the year I was born. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, the old 87, man, you got to get it revved up. It all depends on that.
Oh God. All right. Mizzou fans used to chant "spoon." They used to say that whenever you make a big time tackle, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You've probably never been booed, or at least if you have, you've never known it. Have you
Right,
knowingly been booed before? Because I would
man.
just think it's that.
No, I definitely have never been booed. I think all my worst plays might have happened on the road. So like, other fans are probably cheering when I made a bad play.
That's true.
But here in Atlanta, man, my parents, my mom always she's like, what are they saying? They booing my baby. So that it happened in high school for the first time. Like it wasn't football, it was in basketball. And so my athletic director, his kids, they would all like have their little spoons, and we had a pretty good basketball team. I played the three, played some two a little bit, handle the ball a little bit. But man, those kids were saying spoon while I'm like shooting my free throws and stuff. And so when I got to Missouri, it kind of came out. Once we really got popping, it started to come out. And man, it's kind of cool, bro. I can't even lie, man. It's one of the coolest things. And I see it today here in the dome. I was trying to figure out the other day at Mercedes-Benz, were they booing Coup or were they saying Coup? Because he did miss that field goal, but they were I think they might have been booing Arthur Smith's decision to go and kick the field goal.
Yep.
And that's what kind of sounded like they were booing Coup a little bit. And he missed it. I was like, oh man. See, that would have never happened to me because mine happens after the play, so that's kind of sweet. But I had a little love there.
Yeah, you're never going to miss a tackle, and then you're going to hear the boo birds from that. It's just going to be big time play in the backfield and smooth. Like that's the absolute best. I love it.
Definitely, man.
All right, last one for you. What is the best piece of advice that you give to a college athlete in the current landscape of NIL, transfer portal, all those different things?
That's good. It's not always greener on the other side. That's what I'll say, because a lot of these guys are very successful and they're putting their name in the portal. That's a smart move. It still may not be green on the other side, but if you don't have any tape and you're just kind of, upset at your situation or you're not getting the opportunity, man, hey, wait your turn, man. I ran down on special teams my first year, burned my red shirt to run down on kickoff. It has to mean something to you. So if you stick around there, learn that scheme, keep working hard, your opportunity is going to come, make the most of it. If it doesn't come, hey, we're all going to go pro in something. That's what they say.
That's true. That's like straight out of the NCAA commercial right there. That was it. Oh, man. This has been great. Everyone in the Atlanta area looking for basically any type of training, check out Legacy Sports Complex. Awesome stuff that you're doing with it. Good luck to you and good luck to your Tigers in the bowl season.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me. Great energy, man. Keep up the great work.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. Line of the week. I'm going to go to a painful place, a very, very painful place for my line of the week. I'm going to go with Joe Flacco. Look, we've had a lot of backup quarterbacks in line of the week because there are just some really cool backup quarterback stories this year in the NFL with all the injuries. If we had recorded after Monday Night Football last week, Tommy DeVito would have been a lock for line of the week. Maybe his dad, maybe his agent. I don't know, but people probably heard enough about him. But yeah, this week, 48. No, he's not 48. Joseph Vincent Flacco is 38 years old, not 48. Feels like he's 48 with the way that he moves outside of the pocket. I'm not bitter at all.
Could have fooled me, yeah.
Yeah, man. 38 is the new 28. And doesn't matter because whoever it is just going to find a way to beat the Bears. Of course, the last remaining playoff hopes that my team had up in smoke thanks to a 38-year-old that wasn't Tom Brady or anything like that. He wasn't even that great, but he was good down the stretch. He really was. Leaving life at home as a 38-year-old with 5 kids and stepping in and just beating the Jags and then beating the Bears to keep the Browns playoff hope alive. Look, he's going to play in a playoff game for the first time in 9 years. It's going to happen. Another dominant defense that he gets to work with. I'm happy for the guy. I'm really happy. I'm just not happy. I'm just sad because how in the world does Darnell Mooney not catch that football? Well, how in the world is that sitting there on a Hail Mary and his job as someone who makes millions of dollars is sitting in the end zone waiting for that football to drop the exact way that it did, and he's pretended like it was like he was stunned to see the football. Stunned to see the football, Darnell Mooney was. It's not about him. It's about giving credit to Joe Flacco and him having a great moment for a guy that has made a lot of money. And I salute because he's doing stuff very, very well. And my team does not do things very, very, very well. And that is where we're at, where I'm jealous of a Browns team with a 38-year-old quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, quarterback play in the NFL, like I always joke about, it's just never been worse. And yeah, I mean, Mooney, I think, had a similar play against the Saints in the notorious MVP Nickelodeon game. I actually think I think if I remember correctly, you guys should have beaten us in that game, but he had the exact same play happen. And I just remember being like, well, he was wide open on a post route and he like dropped the ball going forward. And I just remember being like, just don't trust that guy. It was like a very weird little, like, I'm out. I was like a dad. I was like, he can't Butterfinger. So it's wild to see that happen again. And my dumb little theory proved right. But yeah, I mean, it's anybody's league on Sundays, which sometimes is not a great thing.
No, it's bad. It's really bad. But what are you going to do? Football's stupid outside of college football. NFL football is just dumb. Nobody should watch it. Everybody should just watch college football. That's what I always say.
Listen, yes, our teams being bad is why we hate the NFL. Let's be clear here. If they were good, we'd be like, the NFL is better than ever. Speaking of old quarterbacks, and a quarterback that is actually 4 years younger than Joe Flacco, this will blow your mind, Cam Newton. Cam Newton is my lad of the week. Now, Cam Newton is a guy who has, especially more recently, gotten, not great press clippings. He's a guy who's been, a little bit bold and brash, done some stuff that just kind of like in front of a microphone that's just not very classy. But I will say he had like a 10-minute video that he posted in response to like some criticism. So this all wraps around. He was talking about how we only have about 5 quarterbacks who are game changers in the league right now. And of course, like the economy of takes, everyone was so mad at that because they wanted to talk about how great Brock Purdy was, like that like goes down to earlier in this segment or earlier in this podcast, you're like, oh yeah, like we got to stop talking about, National Signing Day. And it's like people like us have that option, but we could just say we don't care about this. But there's a whole economy around recruiting that is always going to make recruiting the thing. Well, just like that, there's a whole economy around the NFL and quarterback play where you got to boost up, Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy, all these game managers that are playing well and their teams are playing well because you have to have content. And Cam Newton came at it from a different perspective. He was like, we just got a ton of game managers in the league. So this clip he puts out this week starts with a highlight of everyone just calling him kind of dumb and unqualified. And his point was, you can attack my point of view without attacking me as a person. And basically his point was, it's wild that because I type in hieroglyphics and I'm wearing a funny hat that you guys don't see that I've been him, that I've done these things before, that I've been a game changer. And by whatever definition of game changer Cam Newton was in, especially in 2015, he was backpacking Philly Brown and those boys to the Super Bowl with only, third leg Greg as his best receiving option. And he kind of goes through, hey, it's the other side of an argument that we've talked about a lot that we actually just had a version of where it's, we've gone the other way in sports media where a bunch of people that are kind of like stats based, like PFF, kind of like number cruncher guys, kind of own the conversation now. So much so that if you're a guy like Cam Newton, it's almost like Desmond Howard speaking on the Heisman. It's like, no matter what you have to say about Desmond Howard is a Heisman winner. He has been there. He has been in big games. He has done that type of stuff. And so you can say, oh, I don't respect your opinion just because you played, which is exactly how I feel. That is a big time, like Ryan Russillo school of thought. Like, just because you played doesn't mean you get to coast. But Cam's point was, how can you take away with what I've done because of how I present myself? And just a cool little moment from him talking about, like, let me remind you all really quick, like, just because I'm goofy, just because I make jokes, just because I smile really big, does not mean that I was not a terror on the football field. And it's just cool, man. I'm loving to see what Cam has done in the final part of his career. He has a cigar bar here in Atlanta, or there back home in Atlanta, called Fellowship's really cool. We've shot there before. Him and Cecil, funny enough, opened it up. But it's cool to have someone look in the camera and say, like, I'm proud of who I am. I've done what I've done. I don't need all this accolades and all this stuff from people who are trying to stay relevant based off of people who do what I do. So, and the cool thing that he snuck around to is that he has an LLC, he has a podcast, he has all this stuff going on. And he was preaching, pay it forward and independent media and building your own brand versus relying on, big network and stuff like that and trying to give people opportunities. So I think that's a cool way to look at it. Instead of like tearing people down, instead of saying, oh, look at Cam, he looks ridiculous. Like, think about what a person's saying and don't immediately judge them. Like, we could have, I'm not going to name it. You know what? Yeah, I will. Let's say Darren Ravel just comes out and has the most amazing college football take ever. Our first thought is going to be, well, let's raise an eyebrow. But then, you got to think about it and say, sometimes, we have to evaluate that based on what is said and not who said it, which I understand it's all part of the context. But I think Cam's kind of like speech this week was super cool because he was just talking about, like, if nothing else, view me as your equal. View me as a person who you don't roll your eyes whenever I talk. And it's funny that Cam, through being different and marching to the beat of his own drum, has gotten tuned out by people despite what he accomplished and how he has been a franchise changer kind of at every level,
There are no people on earth who think that Cam was in the game manager category, right? Like, that's not a thing, right? Okay.
No, they were just calling him silly and saying he dresses weird and that he just doesn't know what he's talking about. And he was like, I'm serious. I'm not unserious.
Facts. Yeah. I mean, at the same time, like, Cam does that stuff in part because, okay, like, he's expressing himself, and when you're doing stuff that's very outside of the norm, people are going to comment on why you have Instagram posts that are in total hieroglyphics and nobody has any idea what in the world you're trying to say. And if you're doing that, okay, that's fine. You're perfectly within your rights. People are also going to be like, okay, it's just a little bit strange, whatever. There's also a line of like, and look, I've consumed a little bit of Cam content lately and seen some of the stuff that he was doing. He was on Part of My Take recently, and I know he and Brandon Marshall are doing that tour together right now. And I find myself rooting for Cam. I've always kind of found myself rooting for Cam without any sort of affiliation to him. There are certain things he says and does that are just going to be considered different and weird because we're just not used to seeing them. So like there is a line of like, all right, well, what's weird and what's he putting out there into the world, and what's being like, if you're sitting there saying Cam doesn't have the right to speak on football because he types in hieroglyphics, all right, that's a you thing, that's not a Cam thing. But yeah, I mean, he is a different dude, but a game changer in every sense of the word, and a game changer in media. He probably will be in the very near future, as well as he continues to grow his platform right now. Good stuff. Quarterback centric, very quarterback centric today. Love it. We have our first episode of Betting the Bulls is already up. The second episode, the 4 non-playoff New Year's 6 episodes, that is going to drop on Wednesday. Maybe by the time you're listening to this, it's already there as well. Marler, myself, our sports betting expert from Sports Betting Dime, Crossing Broad, Bob Wankel. He is awesome. It was a great first episode. It's like a 2-hour first episode with a lot of gambling insight, talking about all those other Power 5 games. We are going to have these episodes once a week throughout bowl season. It's just these are bonus episodes. You don't have to do anything additional. You don't have to subscribe or anything like that. They're just going to be there in your feed. We're still going to have all of our normal episodes on top of that. We're going to preview a bowl game later in the week. Well, we're going to be able to oh, no, actually, we're going to wait till next week. We're going to wait till next week to preview A&M, and then we're really going to get into the thick of it. So that's what we'll
I was getting excited, dog. I thought we had some random bowl game we was going to talk about.
Yeah, we'll hold off on that. We'll hold off on that just and just wait until next week. If you have not, leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast, which is presented by Texas Pete. Follow us on the app formerly known as Twitter @the SCS Pod, @SetDownSouth, @CJ O'Gara, @GoSoHard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.